Hey guys, tonight we're entering the most velvet-draped, gossip-filled chamber history has ever offered, the royal bedroom of Queen Victoria herself. Not the prim, proper, black-clad widow you see in dusty portraits, but the real, slightly chaotic, and wildly scandalous Victorian marriage. Yes. Tonight is about love, power, and the kind of family drama that makes your holiday dinners look tame. So before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that white noise, and get as comfortable as possible. But let's pause for a second. What does it take to scandalize a nation when you're the actual queen? Did Queen Victoria and Prince Albert really invent the Christmas tree, or did they just steal it and put their monogram on it? What do you do when your mother-in-law is also your aunt? Your uncle is your father-in-law, and your children are about to become everyone's problem. How does a queen balance running an empire, managing 9 kids, and writing more passive-aggressive letters than a HOA president? And, seriously, how much trouble can one corset really cause? Congratulations, you've just woken up in Buckingham Palace in the mid-1800s. The wallpaper is floral, the family trees are tangled, and you're about to discover why Queen Victoria's marriage was the most scandalous in history. Good luck. You open your eyes and realize your future husband is your first cousin. Welcome to European royalty, where romance is a family affair and the gene pool is more like a hot tub. Victoria and Albert's love story began with awkward introductions, German pastries, and the faint sound of distant church bells, or maybe that was just Auntie interrupting. Let's set the scene. It's the early 1830s, and you are Victoria. Well, actually, you're still Alexandrina to your closest relatives. But Victoria sounds more queenly, so let's run with it. You're the princess at the center of every family gathering, and your mother is already planning your wedding probably before you've finished your morning tea. The stakes are high. Whoever you marry doesn't just get your hand, they get a front-row seat to running the world's fussiest empire. Tinder, this is not. The choices? Slim. Your shortlist consists of a handful of German princes, a distant Russian with questionable sideburns, and, surprise, your own cousin, Prince Albert, freshly arrived from Coburg with enough hair gel to flatten a sheepdog. The meet-cute isn't quite as adorable as you'd hope. There's no bumping into each other in the market over dropped apples. No, this is a state-sanctioned, awkward family reunion with a seating chart, where half the guests are hoping you'll fall in love, and the other half are just there for the strudel. You're both barely out of adolescence, dressed in outfits that require engineering degrees to assemble, and under the watchful glare of mothers who believe that emotional vulnerability is best expressed through pointed embroidery. The conversation? Stiff. Victoria, for all her later confidence, is, at this stage, a teenager with more opinions than social experience. Albert, meanwhile, is the classic shy, earnest type, the kind of guy who's memorized his German verbs and brought his own pocket microscope for fun. You try to break the ice by offering him some Battenberg cake. He tries to impress you by discussing agricultural reform. The chemistry islets call it potential energy. Every time you catch each other's eye, 3 aunts gasp and 2 chaperones scribble in their diaries. And in the background, someone's Pomeranian is yapping with the energy of a small, caffeinated tornado. But here's the thing about royal matchmaking. You're not just looking for love. You're looking for someone who won't accidentally trigger a European war every time they open their mouth at dinner. Albert ticks the right boxes. He's polite, well-educated, and not prone to running off with French actresses. The fact that you share a grandmother is, bizarrely, a selling point. In this world, family ties aren't a warning label, they're the glue that keeps the alliance together. The whole royal strategy is basically, if you can't keep it in the borders, keep it in the bloodline. Still, there's genuine sweetness to your encounters. Albert is gentle, even if a little awkward. And you, despite having been raised in a household where expressing feelings is about as common as finding a parking space at Buckingham Palace, are smitten. You confide in your diary with the enthusiasm of someone who's just discovered their first celebrity crush. "He's so handsome," you write. "He's so good." You underline "good" 3 times, because in Victorian England, good is as close to hot as you're allowed to get. The family, naturally, overanalyzes every moment. Your mother hovers at a safe distance, ready to intervene if you look like you're having too much fun. Your uncle Leopold, Albert's hype man and part-time royal matchmaker, is quietly orchestrating candlelit walks and subtle reminders about the importance of marrying responsibly, by which he means, "Marry my nephew, please and thank you." The servants gossip, the dogs sense opportunity and beg for table scraps with diplomatic intensity. Eventually, Albert must return home to Coburg, leaving you to pine dramatically while surrounded by brocade cushions and unsolicited marriage proposals from lesser nobles. You send each other letters, hundreds, eventually, full of shy longing, coded references to shared pastries, and the sort of over-punctuated sincerity only possible before the invention of the telephone. It's a courtship in slow motion, every step scrutinized by a continent full of relatives. So begins the royal romance, not quite star-crossed, but certainly cross-stitched into the fabric of every family tree in Europe. It's messy, it's awkward, and it's entirely possible your future children will need a flowchart to explain how you met. But for now, you're just 2 teenagers, caught between duty and desire, trying to make small talk while your grandmother watches. Welcome to the royal meet cute. May the odds and the chromosomes be ever in your favor. Forget dating apps. You've got dynasties, scheming uncles, and a mother who can outmanipulate any reality show contestant. Queen Victoria's search for a husband is less about love, more about treaties, and a dash of "please let him not be ugly." Let's talk about royal matchmaking. You don't swipe left. You consult with a council of relatives who are basically the world's most meddlesome HR department. Your romantic prospects are chosen not for sparkling personality or shared love of long walks, but for their ability to produce politically convenient babies and keep at least 3 countries from declaring war before breakfast. As Victoria, you are every bit a prize to be won, and every eligible bachelor from St. Petersburg to Stuttgart is suddenly a close personal friend of the family with a suspiciously up-to-date portrait. Your mother, the Duchess of Kent, is the ultimate power user of this system. Forget helicopter parents. She's running your love life like a military campaign. Every morning begins with a short list of approved candidates, carefully ranked by political influence and facial symmetry. Each comes with a file thicker than your favorite volume of Shakespeare. How many titles he owns, how many horses he can afford, and whether his family has a history of gout. If you thought dating in your 30s was stressful, try doing it with an empire at stake and your mother timing every conversation with a pocket watch. It's not just about looks or charm. Each prince is a diplomatic handshake with legs. Consider the Russian option. Grand Duke Alexander, dashing, mysterious, rumored to have a pet bear. Marrying him would bring your empire closer to Russia, a tempting alliance, assuming you don't mind weekly bear encounters and the occasional duel at breakfast. Or how about Prince Augustus of Saxe-Coburg, whose main qualification is vaguely related to everyone and mostly harmless? There are German princes with more medals than sense, French cousins who only want to borrow money, and the odd Scandinavian thrown in to keep things spicy. And then there's your uncle Leopold, self-declared royal influencer and matchmaker-in-chief. He's the type of relative who shows up at holidays with spreadsheets and unsolicited advice, dropping hints about eligible cousins while quietly moving chess pieces on the European board. You know, Victoria, Prince Albert is very accomplished. And he plays the piano, he'll say, while conveniently overlooking the fact that he's also your first cousin. In the royal world, that's not a red flag, it's practically a recommendation. You are, of course, expected to play along. There are official portraits, private balls, and endless rounds of formal introductions. Every event is a covert audition. You learn to read body language like a code breaker. Is he interested? Or is he just counting the candelabras? Will he compliment your piano skills, or ask about the weather in a way that suggests he's memorized the barometric pressure? Flirting, Victorian style, means lowering your eyes at exactly the right moment and praying you don't trip over your hoop skirt. But beneath the opera gloves and court etiquette, you're still a teenager, just hoping your future husband doesn't have halitosis or a criminal record. In a rare moment of privacy, you confide to your diary that the whole thing is exhausting. You're tired of being a pawn in a game where everyone knows the rules except you. You daydream about running away to Italy and living off pastries. Then your mother appears with the latest batch of suitors, and it's back to the drawing board. Eventually, of course, the family narrows it down. Prince Albert is back in the picture, still earnest, still slightly intimidated by your royal authority. You're told he's the one. Good blood, good reputation, excellent at organizing sock drawers. The choice is clear, mostly because everyone around you keeps reminding you it is. You sigh, straighten your tiara, and prepare for a lifetime of formal dinners, diplomatic crises, and, if you're lucky, maybe even a little romance. Because in Victorian England, matchmaking isn't about falling in love. It's about falling in line, preferably with someone who can sign a treaty, fill out a family tree, and look reasonably attractive in a waistcoat. And if you happen to get a husband out of the deal, well, that's just a bonus. Picture this. You, a 19-year-old queen, forced to propose to your own cousin because royal protocol says so. Now add 40 servants eavesdropping behind velvet curtains and a pet dog who absolutely wants in on this action. Let's set the mood. It's November. The kind of damp, cold day when even the royal fireplaces can't quite shake off the British chill. You're Queen Victoria, officially monarch, unofficially a bundle of nerves. The palace is buzzing, and not just because Prince Albert is in town, it's because every butler, chambermaid, and well-placed potted fern knows what's about to go down. Royal protocol is strict. As the queen, you must be the one to propose. No kneeling prince, no romantic surprise. Just you, trying to look regal while your knees are knocking together beneath a mountain of silk skirts. Albert arrives, freshly pressed and smelling faintly of lavender and continental anxiety. He's been warned by his advisors that this is a formal occasion, but nobody has told him what to do with his hands. He stands there, awkwardly holding a bouquet of something German and prickly, while you try to remember your speech. You've practiced this moment in your head 100 times. But right now your mind is emptier than the palace wine cellar after a state banquet. You clear your throat and gesture to the nearest divan. Albert sits, perching on the very edge, as if sitting any deeper would trigger a diplomatic incident. You make polite small talk about the weather, foggy, as usual, the state of the gardens, soggy, as always, and how your dog Dash has recently developed a taste for royal slippers. Dash, sensing his cue, barrels into the room and flops at Albert's feet with a look that says, "You're not the boss of me, German boy." The tension breaks just a little. Maybe dogs are good for something after all. Then comes the moment. You look Albert in the eye, trying to ignore the sensation of 40 servants silently holding their breath behind embroidered curtains. You straighten your tiara. "Albert," you say, "I think we should be married." The words hang in the air, formal and a little bit absurd, like proposing a business merger but with more lace. Albert, being Albert, immediately blushes the exact shade of the Windsor carpet. He rises to his feet, stammers something about the great happiness of my life, and, in a fit of continental enthusiasm, actually tries to kneel, forgetting that this is not his job, and also that the family dachshund has just stolen one of his shoes. You both laugh, relief, and embarrassment mingling into a kind of giddy delight. It's not the stuff of fairy tales, but it's real, and, honestly, a little bit perfect. Of course, Nothing in royal life is ever truly private. As soon as you and Albert exchange your promises, the entire palace seems to exhale at once. Somewhere, a servant faints from sheer emotional overload. A footman immediately dispatches messages to every crowned head in Europe. It's happening. She did it. Alert the protocol team. Within hours, you're receiving congratulations from relatives you've never heard of and wedding gift suggestions from people who definitely think tasteful means as many diamonds as possible. Back in your rooms, you collapse into a pile of velvet and nerves. There's a knock at the door. It's your mother, already reminding you about guest lists, floral arrangements, and whether you've remembered to schedule time for a suitably dramatic public walk with Albert. Meanwhile, Albert himself is busy writing heartfelt letters to his brother and possibly sketching a detailed plan for how to avoid stepping on Dash at the ceremony. You try to savor the moment, but royal engagements move at the speed of a runaway carriage. You're swept into a whirlwind of planning, etiquette lessons, and consultations with court artists. How do you feel about wearing 17 pounds of lace, Your Majesty? All the while, the servants are still whispering about the proposal, how the Queen nearly tripped on her own hem, how Albert's accent got thicker with every syllable, how Dash barked at exactly the wrong moment. But underneath the comedy of errors, there's something sweet about it all. You didn't get a private proposal under the stars, but you did get honesty, a shared laugh, and a partner who looks just as nervous as you feel. It's not a fairy tale exactly, but it's the beginning of something real. And as you finally manage to sneak away for a quiet moment, just you, your diary, and the lingering smell of Albert's nervous cologne, you realize that sometimes the best proposals happen with a side of awkwardness, an audience of servants, and a royal dachshund who's always in the way. Welcome to married life, Your Majesty. Try not to trip on the tiara. The big day arrives, and so do thousands of sticky-beak Londoners. You can't sneeze without someone painting it in watercolor. The dress is white. Scandalous. The cake is taller than your neighbor's cottage, and the public is obsessed with your undergarments. Let's set the scene. It's February 10th, 1840, and you, Queen Victoria, are about to get married in what will become the most dissected social event since Henry VIII's last divorce. Your nerves are shot, your mother is fussing over imaginary wrinkles, and there are so many flowers in the chapel you're convinced you'll develop hay fever before the vows. The palace is a hive of chaos, footmen running at full speed, decorators trying to hang more greenery, and at least one duchess complaining loudly that her invitation was lost in the post. Spoiler, it wasn't. You're not allowed a moment of peace. Your hairdresser is wielding more pins than a medieval weapon. Your dressmaker is fussing over the world's first white wedding dress. Because you're a trendsetter, apparently. And there's a crowd outside the gates that looks suspiciously like they'd sell their own grandmother for a peek at your bouquet. Paparazzi isn't a word yet, but the effect is the same. Every artist, poet, and gossipy neighbor is on high alert, ready to immortalize your every sneeze, smile, or wardrobe malfunction in endless watercolor sketches. And speaking of wardrobe malfunctions, let's talk about your wedding dress. You've chosen white, a color so bold and rare in bridal fashion that the news spreads across the empire like a royal fever. People debate the meaning. Is it innocence, a political statement, or just a chance to make every other bride look underdressed? No one knows, but now every guest is squinting suspiciously at your hem. And somewhere in the crowd, 3 grandmothers faint from the sheer scandal of it all. Your veil alone could double as a fishing net. And you're pretty sure you've got more lace on your person than in the entire history of tablecloths. Meanwhile, the wedding cake. If you think modern wedding cakes are over the top, you haven't seen a Victorian showstopper. Your cake is so massive, it needs its own support staff. There are rumors it was engineered by the same team that built the Crystal Palace. Bakers arrive with ladders, and somewhere in the middle, a child is trying to sneak a taste, risking a royal scolding and possibly being written out of the will. Each tier is decorated with white icing, sugar flowers, and enough symbolism to keep the newspapers busy for weeks. At the top, a tiny sugar Victoria and Albert, locked in an eternal, slightly awkward embrace. Outside, the streets are chaos. Londoners have come out in droves, packed shoulder to shoulder, waving flags, throwing flowers, and craning their necks for a glimpse of the royal procession. You can practically feel the collective gasp when your carriage rounds the corner. There's a running commentary from every window. Isn't she small? Isn't he handsome? Did you hear about her corset? There are bets being placed on everything from the length of your train to whether your dog Dash will sneak into the ceremony. Spoiler, he absolutely tries. And then there's the question everyone's whispering. What are you wearing under the dress? Victorian England, it turns out, is fascinated by royal undergarments. Are you sporting the latest French crinoline? Will there be a wardrobe malfunction? Someone claims to have seen a corset embroidered with tiny crowns. By the end of the week, at least 5 newspapers will have printed sketches of what they think you wore, and one daring columnist will declare you've single-handedly revolutionized the science of petticoats. The ceremony itself is a blur of organ music, whispered prayers, and an awkward moment where the archbishop nearly drops the ring. You try to look composed, but your mind is racing. Don't trip, don't sneeze, and for the love of all things royal, don't say I do to the wrong cousin. Albert looks both dashing and slightly terrified, which is fair because he knows he's marrying into a life of constant public scrutiny and a family who measures time in scandals per minute. Finally, vows are exchanged, rings are, eventually, slid onto fingers, and the crowd erupts in cheers loud enough to shake the palace windows. You manage a smile for the painters, try not to faint in the world's heaviest dress, and think, just for a second, maybe this is what happiness looks like when you're queen. 1 part fairy tale, 2 parts public spectacle, and a dash of please let no one trip over the cake. Congratulations, you're married. Now let the real scandals begin. Ever had a mother-in-law who just won't move out? Queen Victoria did. She came with opinions, German sausages, and a habit of judging you from across the breakfast table. Let's set the royal breakfast scene. You're newly married, hoping for a little post-honeymoon bliss, and instead, every morning starts with your mother-in-law, the Duchess of Kent, parked firmly at the table. There she is, upright and unyielding, spreading liverwurst on toast and looking at you like you've put the tea cozy on the cat again. You, in your own palace, feel more like a guest at someone else's endless sleepover. This is not just any mother-in-law. The Duchess comes with a personal entourage, a trunk full of family recipes, none of them English, and a keen sense for sniffing out any hint of disorder in your household. If a footman so much as sneezes at the wrong time, she'll bring it up at dinner, alongside an unsolicited lecture on the correct arrangement of napkin rings. Think of her as the original multitasker, part royal consultant, part emotional weather system, part health inspector, and she is always there. If you thought marrying a prince meant a private suite and romantic breakfasts in bed, think again. In the Victorian palace, privacy is a group activity. Your new husband Albert tries to shield you with polite conversation about science or music, but the Duchess can't resist butting in, usually with a comment about how in Coburg we would never eat eggs this runny, or Albert, you always looked so much healthier before you moved here. Nothing like a breakfast roast with your side of kippers. And it's not just food. The Duchess has strong opinions on every aspect of your life. Childcare, household budgets, which paintings should hang in the dining room, and whether the palace dog is getting enough exercise. She disapproves of your taste in wallpaper, your late-night reading habits, and the scandalous amount of correspondence you have with foreign leaders. She even keeps a running tally of how many times you've been caught laughing too loudly before noon. You find yourself apologizing for things you didn't even know could offend a duchess. Wearing a slightly wrinkled gown? That's a 5-minute lecture. Choosing the wrong bonnet for an afternoon stroll? That's a scandal in 3 countries. There's a certain tension that settles in the air, a kind of royal stalemate as you both circle each other through the grand halls. Albert, poor soul, is stuck in the middle, attempting to broker peace treaties between his mother and his wife with the same diplomatic skill he'll one day use at international summits. Meanwhile, the servants have developed their own coping strategies, suddenly finding urgent tasks elsewhere whenever the Duchess enters a room, and placing bets on who will break first, Victoria or the wallpaper. But the real battleground is the nursery. The Duchess has extremely clear ideas about how royal children should be raised, and she's not shy about making them known. She believes in strict routines, open windows in winter, it builds character, Victoria, and at least 3 layers of wool per child, regardless of season. You, on the other hand, would like to spend time with your own children without a running commentary about how everything was done so much better in Germany. Every attempt at bonding with your kids is punctuated by helpful advice, thinly veiled criticism, and the constant, looming presence of the family matriarch. Occasionally, you fantasize about staging a dramatic escape, perhaps hiding out in one of the palace's unused towers, or sneaking off to Scotland for official business that involves 0 in-laws and maximum tranquility. But the Duchess is always one step ahead. No matter where you go, there she is, ready to ask if you remembered to use the proper dessert spoon. In the end, you realize that surviving the mother-in-law from the 9th circle is a royal rite of passage. You learn to smile politely, nod at her unsolicited wisdom, and develop a selective hearing that lets you enjoy your toast in peace. After all, this is Victorian England. If you can handle the daily gauntlet of royal life with your mother-in-law judging your every move, you can handle anything history throws at you. And maybe, just maybe, you'll even earn her grudging respect. One perfectly folded napkin at a time. Welcome to your marital home, a palace full of drafts, suspicious butlers, and relatives who never leave. The plumbing is questionable, and every corridor echoes with whispered gossip about your love life. Let's get comfortable, or as comfortable as you can get in a house the size of a small village, designed for grandeur rather than actual human living. Your home is Buckingham Palace, but palace is just a fancy way of saying 1,000 rooms and not one quiet corner. No matter where you go, you are never truly alone. You could try hiding in a broom closet, but there's already a second cousin reading poetry in there, and 3 footmen arguing about the best way to polish a chandelier. The walls are marble, the ceilings painted with cherubs who all seem to be judging you. You can't so much as sneeze without echoing down a hallway and alerting every minor baron within a half-mile radius. Privacy is a distant dream, something that only happens to commoners and cats. Every room is full of people. Servants gliding by on mysterious errands. Aunts dropping by to see the children. Translation, check for scandals. And distant relatives who appear to have moved in just for the season but never leave. It's less Downton Abbey, more eternal family reunion. Your butlers are the silent sentinels of this marble labyrinth, always present, never quite looking you in the eye, but somehow knowing exactly which piece of gossip to repeat to which chambermaid. They move like ghosts, if ghosts carried silver trays and silently judged your choice of nightcap. You once tried to ask a footman for directions to the blue drawing room, only to be handed a map and a faint, knowing smile. Even the staff isn't immune to the lure of palace intrigue. Somewhere between the linen closet and the state dining room, there's an entire shadow economy of information. Who sneezed at breakfast? Who left muddy footprints in the West Wing? And, most critically, who had the audacity to order a second helping of pudding? The plumbing is the true royal scandal. Pipes clank and gurgle at odd hours, and the hot water is about as reliable as a politician's promise. Some days, you're lucky to get a lukewarm trickle. Other days, The taps produce something that smells like it was last filtered through a 17th century boot. No one is really sure where all the bathrooms are. Rumor has it there's a secret lavatory built for George III that's been lost for decades, only to be discovered by an adventurous dachshund or a very confused duke. Don't even think about drawing a bath without a battalion of servants and a prayer to Saint Plumbing. Gossip is the real central heating of the palace. It flows through the halls faster than hot air, warming up cold corridors with tales of who was seen leaving whose room after midnight and what the Queen actually said to her mother-in-law. Allegedly, pass the mustard, please. Your every movement is catalogued, analysed, and, if necessary, embellished for maximum effect. Servants know everything before you do, and your family can't resist turning minor misunderstandings into full-blown international incidents. You once tripped over the family dog and started a rumor that you were expecting again. The dog has never been more popular. Trying to carve out personal space is like playing hide and seek with professional seekers. You'll find your favorite nook by the window already claimed by a duchess pretending to read, and every attempt to sneak off for a quiet cup of tea is thwarted by a helpful uncle who wants to discuss the finer points of estate management. Nighttime doesn't bring relief either. The palace creaks and groans, and someone always seems to be moving furniture at 3 a.m. for aesthetic reasons. Still, for all its chaos, palace life is a spectacle, a living soap opera with better costumes and more chandeliers. You might never have a moment to yourself, but you're never bored. And if the marble floors are cold and the relatives relentless, at least the gossip is always hot, the servants are always listening, and the plumbing is well. Let's just say it builds character. Welcome home, Your Majesty. Privacy sold separately. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert's marriage was productive, to say the least. 9 children in 17 years, each arrival more public than the last. Congratulations, you're officially a full-time parent and part-time monarch. Let's talk about royal family planning, Victorian style. Forget quiet, candlelit evenings. This is an era when every marital milestone is announced to the entire nation. You sneeze and someone starts speculating about a new prince or princess. The bedroom isn't just a private sanctuary. It's practically a public institution. There are more people invested in your reproductive schedule than in the national railway system. You start off, as any young royal couple does, with the simple goal of producing an heir and a spare. That's the polite way of saying, make sure the monarchy survives at least 2 minor carriage accidents. The first child, little Vicky, arrives right on time and to thunderous national applause. The spare, Bertie, future Edward VII, follows soon after, his every burp and rash chronicled in the newspapers as if he's personally responsible for world peace. Mission accomplished? Not quite. Before you can catch your breath, there's a third, and then a fourth. And, for reasons best explained by a very enthusiastic Prince Albert, eventually a 9th. It's less growing a family and more hosting an annual baby parade. Each birth is a palace production. You're not allowed so much as a quiet labor. Instead, you're surrounded by doctors, ladies in waiting, and at least one worried archbishop in the corridor, just in case the child is born with a minor religious crisis. The royal midwife becomes a household name. Newspapers debate the baby's name, potential hair color, and whether the shape of their head means they'll grow up to be a scholar or just another Bavarian prince with opinions about hats. With each new arrival, privacy becomes a luxury even more rare than hot running water. There's no family leave, the queenly duties keep rolling, whether you're waddling down the corridor or trying to nap between audiences. The palace is filled with the sounds of crying, laughter, and the distant echo of someone breaking a valuable vase. Visitors arrive from all corners of Europe, bearing impractical gifts, and before you know it, the royal nursery resembles a small, noisy country of its own. Parenting, Victorian edition, is a team sport, assuming your team is made up entirely of nannies, governesses, and people whose job titles sound suspiciously made up. Every child is assigned an army of caretakers, each with different opinions on discipline, feeding schedules, and the proper angle for royal prams. You're technically in charge, but try telling that to a nursery full of professional baby wranglers and one very determined grandmother who thinks British air is too damp for healthy lungs. Albert is determined to be a hands-on father. A radical idea in an age where most fathers considered their job done once the christening was over. He invents educational games, writes detailed reports about the children's progress, and occasionally startles the staff by actually showing up in the nursery. You try to maintain some royal dignity, but it's difficult when your morning is spent separating squabbling heirs and explaining to the Archbishop why the princesses are chasing the family dog through the portrait gallery. Public interest never fades. The press tracks your pregnancies with the fervour of a royal sport, and by child number 7, even the palace guards are taking bets on whether it'll be a boy or a girl. There's endless speculation about your health, the baby's future, and whether the next arrival will finally have Albert's nose. By the time the 9th baby is born, you've run out of names, patience, and closet space. Through it all, you manage the impossible, keeping a royal household running, overseeing the world's largest empire, and producing more royal offspring than some small principalities. So yes, you're a monarch, but mostly you're tired, surrounded by children, and desperately hoping someone else will handle the next diaper emergency. Welcome to royal parenthood. May your patience be as long as your family tree. Your family tree looks like someone tried to draw a subway map after 3 glasses of sherry. Cousins marry cousins, uncles become in-laws, and everyone is named either Victoria or Albert. Good luck remembering birthdays. This is Royal Genealogy, Victorian edition, a journey where every branch doubles back on itself and where every family reunion feels like a suspiciously well-attended genetics conference. In the world of Queen Victoria, bloodlines are more important than actual blood, and marrying outside the family is viewed with about as much enthusiasm as accidentally dropping a scone in the royal soup. Your children aren't just children, they're international diplomatic alliances with really elaborate christening outfits. Let's try to map this mess. On paper, you're Queen Victoria, head of the world's most famous family. In practice, you are also a granddaughter, niece, cousin, and, depending on the year, your own second cousin's step-aunt twice removed. You can't swing a corgi in Buckingham Palace without hitting someone you're related to, sometimes twice. Sunday dinners are an exercise in remembering which uncle has also become your brother-in-law, and which cousin is currently both married and engaged to different people, but give it time. Then there are the names. For reasons best explained by tradition, superstition, or maybe just a lack of imagination, your children's names are endlessly recycled. There's Victoria the Queen, Victoria the Princess Royal, a German Victoria, an Australian Victoria, and probably a few unofficial Victorias scattered around the continent. The boys don't escape either. You've got multiple Alberts, at least 2 Edwards, and so many Georges you're thinking about issuing them numbers like football jerseys. Family Christmas must look like a Victorian version of roll call, with everyone answering to the same 3 names and at least one small child being accidentally gifted the wrong rocking horse. But names are the least of your worries. The real drama comes from the relentless cousin marriage strategy. The logic is simple. If everyone is related, no one can start a war without also missing a family birthday party. In theory, this promotes peace. In practice, it creates an endless supply of awkward wedding speeches and family squabbles that double as international incidents. You try to keep up, but the invitations read more like logic puzzles. Join us as Princess Alice, daughter of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, marries Prince Louis, her cousin, whose mother is Victoria's aunt, whose brother married Victoria's daughter, who is also named Victoria. By mid-century, your children are scattered across Europe like diplomatic party favors. They marry into every royal house from Russia to Spain, becoming kings, queens, tsars, and empresses. The family photo album turns into a roll call of international power. But the catch is that every political alliance comes with the risk of a cousin turning into an enemy. If you've ever worried about family drama at Thanksgiving, imagine handling it with Prussian generals and French diplomats at the table. It gets more complicated. Sometimes, your kids marry so strategically that you genuinely lose track of who's still in the running for which throne. You keep a color-coded family tree on your desk, but even that turns into a tangled mess after one too many royal christenings and surprise abdications. At one point, you're pretty sure your third son is also your great-nephew's uncle, twice removed and heir to the throne of a country you can't pronounce. Even the court historians give up and start calling everyone dear. It's not all political maneuvering and birthday confusion, though. There's genuine affection too, if you can find it under all the formal titles and ceremonial sashes. Family letters crisscross Europe in a blizzard of updates, invitations, and gentle reminders not to declare war over a misdirected love letter. Victoria herself becomes the grandmother of Europe, a matriarch whose reach extends from the snowy palaces of St. Petersburg to the sun-drenched villas of the Mediterranean. So if your family get-togethers are complicated, spare a thought for Queen Victoria, whose family tree is more like a family tumbleweed, rolling, tangled, and always ready to sprout another royal wedding. And next time you struggle to remember your cousin's birthday, just be grateful you don't have to send gifts to every Victoria and Albert on the continent. Your day begins with being laced into a garment designed by a sadist. It takes 3 maids, a physics degree, and the patience of a saint. Welcome to Victorian glamour. Just don't try to breathe too deeply. Let's start at dawn, because as Queen Victoria, you don't get to hit snooze. Your wake-up call is a symphony of bells, footsteps, and the gentle sound of your chamber door opening, uninvited, of course, by a parade of ladies-in-waiting. They glide in like a flock of particularly determined geese, each with their own specialty. One handles the petticoats, another wields hairbrushes like a dueling sword, and a third is ready with enough pins to reinforce the Tower of London. You, meanwhile, are still blinking sleep out of your eyes, desperately wishing for just 5 more minutes and a coffee, neither of which is available in proper Victorian fashion. First up, the underpinnings. Forget comfy pajamas or elastic waistbands. The main event is the corset, a garment designed to transform you into the ideal Victorian hourglass by squeezing you with the determination of a python at an all-you-can-eat buffet. You stand in the center of the room, arms raised in surrender, as your maids begin to lace you in. There's grunting, there's pulling, and there's the unmistakable sound of someone muttering calculations about tension and structural integrity. Breathing? Optional. Your waist inches smaller with every tug, until you're convinced you could double as a decorative hat stand, now that you've achieved the fashionable silhouette and lost any hope of bending at the waist. It's time for the next layer. The crinoline. This is not just a petticoat, it's a wearable birdcage, a vast, hooped structure guaranteed to turn every doorway into an obstacle course. You try to step into it gracefully, but the crinoline snaps back with a will of its own. You briefly consider making it a national symbol for resilience. The maids fluff, adjust, and issue warnings about sitting down too quickly, lest you bounce across the room like a misfired cannonball. Dressing, of course, is a team sport. Your morning gown is a feat of engineering, requiring a precise choreography of arms, buttons, and layers. You lose count at 7 petticoats, each heavier than the last, and start to question whether anyone in history actually enjoyed this process, or if it's just one long practical joke passed down through generations. Somewhere outside, a footman is timing the whole routine, and you suspect there's an unofficial palace record for fastest full assembly. And then comes the hair. Victorian hair is not so much a style as a competitive event. The goal: sculpt, braid, and pin your hair into a towering masterpiece that says imperial dignity while secretly whispering, "Please don't let it collapse before lunch." Your head becomes a construction site, Brushes fly, curling irons hiss, and a bowl of hairpins disappears without a trace. The lead hairdresser debates which side you're parting should go on as though it's a matter of national security. If your hair refuses to cooperate, there's always the fallback option. Add more ribbons and hope for the best. Just when you think you're finished, there's a last-minute addition. A brooch here, a lace collar there. Perhaps a spray of artificial orange blossoms because, well, fashion. Your reflection in the mirror is stunning, but you're acutely aware that your mobility is now rated somewhere between Victorian statue and taxidermy project. Finally, you make your grand entrance downstairs, hoping no one notices you're already out of breath. You can't bend, can't twist, and definitely can't sneeze without risking a wardrobe disaster. Yet somehow, you're expected to glide through palace halls, host breakfast, and look regal while half your internal organs are gently being relocated. You offer a serene smile, which your mother-in-law will later describe as stiff, and your children will remember as the universal signal for do not mention the dog's latest crime until after tea. So begins your day, corseted, crinolined, coiffed, and composed. Welcome to Victorian glamour, where beauty requires a battalion, and where breathing, as always, is entirely optional. Every morning, you're expected to look regal while making polite conversation about international crises and the price of eggs. Meanwhile, Prince Albert is inventing a new pen, and your mother-in-law is inspecting your table manners. Breakfast in Buckingham Palace is not your average bleary-eyed, toast-in-one-hand scramble. It's a full-scale diplomatic exercise where every sip of tea and flick of a napkin is a tiny act of public relations. You enter the breakfast room, corseted and coiffed, attempting to glide to your seat like a swan, while desperately hoping your crinoline won't take out the porcelain sugar bowl. The table is a landscape of silverware, cut glass dishes, and at least 3 different jams, none of which you are allowed to open yourself. There's always a hovering butler nearby, ready to help and, if you're honest, to listen in. Across the table, Prince Albert is already up and working, sketching improvements for the fountain or doodling blueprints for a new kind of umbrella stand. He's the type who has solved 3 engineering puzzles before you've even finished your first cup of tea. If you attempt small talk, "Sleep well, darling?" he'll reply with a long explanation of water pressure in palace pipes. You nod politely, still unsure whether you're meant to be impressed or just grateful you don't have to fix the leaks yourself. Then there's your mother-in-law, the Duchess of Kent, presiding over her end of the table like a cross between a headmistress and a food critic. She has the uncanny ability to spot the tiniest breach in etiquette from across a crowded room. Did you take the butter with the wrong knife? Did you stir your tea counterclockwise? The Duchess knows, and she will arch an eyebrow in a way that sends a chill through your 7 layers of petticoats. Her running commentary on table manners could fill a small encyclopedia, and you have the distinct sense that every toast crumb you drop will become a story retold at dinner. Or worse, in her next letter to Coburg. As Queen, you're expected to maintain a steady stream of conversation that is both light and dignified. Something about the weather, the health of the horses, or, the fate of the British Empire. This is trickier than it sounds, especially when half the family wants to talk about politics and the other half wants to talk about Prince Albert's latest collection of beetles. You're forever shifting between Empress of Decorum and Patient Mother, fielding questions from your children about whether they can have extra jam, and from your ministers about whether France is going to invade anyone new this week. If you thought your own family breakfasts were noisy, imagine sharing toast with 6 children, 2 royal dogs, a husband who critiques teaspoons, and a mother-in-law, who could probably taste test for poison by glaring alone. The children, of course, are immune to royal solemnity, and have developed a 6th sense for when to spill orange marmalade at the exact moment a foreign dignitary enters the room. Albert tries to keep things orderly with the introduction of color-coded napkin rings, his latest invention, but you suspect this will only encourage them. Meanwhile, the staff never really leaves. Footmen refill tea with a silent efficiency that somehow makes you more anxious. The head butler looms in the background, making sure everything runs on schedule and jotting down notes for his inevitable gossip session with the chambermaids later. The clink of china is interrupted only by the rustle of newspapers being read aloud, and sometimes you hear your own name before your first bite of toast, a sure sign that scandal is brewing, or at least that someone in the press has an opinion about your new bonnet. By the end of breakfast, you've solved minor diplomatic crises, survived a pop quiz in etiquette, and witnessed your husband's latest triumph in mechanical pencil engineering. You've also watched your youngest child attempt to feed a sausage to the dog under the table, while the Duchess murmurs, "In Coburg, children would never, as if Coburg was a magical kingdom where no toast was ever dropped." Congratulations. You made it through another royal breakfast, graceful, dignified, and with only minimal toast-related casualties. And as you rise from the table, you know that the true backbone of the empire is not steel or steam, but tea, patience, and the steely-eyed judgment of the woman sitting across from you. Nannies are supposed to be discreet, but your staff has a direct line to every tabloid in London. Each child's scraped knee is front-page news. Did someone say royal tantrum? There's a headline for that. Welcome to the royal nursery, where childhood innocence is constantly at war with public curiosity. You'd think that the private world of the palace would shield your children from the prying eyes of London's gossips. But you'd be wrong. The walls have ears and, apparently, subscription services to every scandal rag in Britain. If one of your 9 children so much as sneezes in an unusual manner, there's an anonymous tip in the morning papers by sunrise, complete with a speculative sketch. Possible symptoms of a Germanic cold. The nannies, of course, are a special breed. Part drill sergeant, part therapist, and always armed with an air of absolute authority. They run the nursery with the efficiency of a military campaign. Breakfast is served at precisely 7. Lessons begin at 8. And tantrums are logged, analyzed, and, on especially bad days, threatened with a formal reprimand from the Queen herself. These women could organize a small invasion force with nothing but a spoon and a bottle of cod liver oil. But secrecy is not their strong suit. If little Leopold refuses his bath, you can bet half the court will know before you finish your own tea. It's said the fastest way to spread a rumor in London is to whisper it in the royal nursery. Even the corgis are suspected of eavesdropping. You try to maintain dignity. But it's not easy when your children are essentially living tabloid fodder. The press is hungry for any glimpse behind the palace curtains. Princess Alice throws porridge, kitchen maid injured, or Prince Arthur's new tooth. Is it a sign of royal genius? The tiniest incident gets inflated until you're fielding concerned letters from foreign monarchs about the well-being of your offspring. You start to dread the sound of distant giggles, knowing that somewhere a headline is being drafted. Exclusive, royal laughter heard after hours, scandal or sign of happiness. The children themselves are blissfully unaware of the headlines they generate. They're too busy with the important work of childhood, namely, testing the laws of physics in the grand staircase, organizing unauthorized cricket matches in the ballroom, and perfecting the art of hiding peas in their napkins. Your attempts at discipline are frequently undermined by a small army of well-meaning aunts who arrive with sweets and a strong sense of nostalgia. Any royal rule is only as good as its last enforcer. 1 minute, you're threatening exile to the nursery's time, out tower, and the next, your mother-in-law is reading fairy tales and declaring the children spirited, not naughty. The staff, meanwhile, has a secret society-level network for sharing stories. What happens in the nursery never, ever stays in the nursery. The footmen hear it from the nannies, the housemaids hear it from the footmen, and by the time you're halfway through a council meeting, the Prime Minister is asking if it's true that Princess Helena has started a stamp collection with suspicious political overtones. You start to wonder if there's a direct telegraph from the nursery to Fleet Street. Even the children's toys are suspect. Each new doll or wooden horse becomes the subject of rumors. Was it a diplomatic gift or a bribe from a foreign ambassador? The press once speculated for days on the political significance of a teddy bear, convinced it signaled a new alliance with Germany. You consider issuing a public statement. Sometimes a bear is just a bear. But for all the chaos, the nursery is also the heart of the palace. A noisy, joyful, unpredictable kingdom where you are simultaneously ruler and chief referee. The daily dramas of scraped knees, lost mittens, and mysteriously vanished jam jars are exhausting, but also grounding. When the headlines fade and the children are finally asleep, you find yourself grateful for the noise, the mess, and even the gossip. Because in the end, scandal is just another sign that your family, royal, ridiculous, and occasionally covered in porridge, is, in its own way, perfectly normal. Some men golf. Prince Albert builds museums and collects beetles. If you leave him alone for 10 minutes, you'll return to a room full of stuffed birds and a new system for cataloguing your curtains. This is Victorian marriage. As designed by an overachieving German prince with a passion for order and an energy level that makes your average border collie look lazy. Most husbands just leave socks on the floor. Prince Albert leaves blueprints. You, as Queen Victoria, never know what new project he'll be championing next. The palace is already a labyrinth of rooms, corridors, and suspiciously complicated plumbing, but Albert takes one look and sees nothing but improvement opportunities. Let's start with the museums. Albert doesn't just want to display art. He wants to revolutionize British taste, one gilded frame at a time. He's sketching new exhibition halls on the back of your grocery lists, proposing educational lectures at breakfast, and, if given half a chance, will turn the state dining room into an interactive gallery about the wonders of ventilation. He's the driving force behind the Crystal Palace, a glass and steel marvel that appears in your life much like a surprise relative, suddenly, unavoidably, and with endless discussion about roof drainage. You try to act interested. But the fourth time he explains plate glass manufacturing, you start eyeing the exit, wondering if anyone will notice you slipping out behind the ferns. And then there are the beetles. Lots of beetles. Glass cases full of them. Cabinets devoted to them, each carefully labelled, sorted, and, if you're honest, a little bit terrifying in the way only large collections of insects can be. The children are divided. Half are fascinated. The other half are plotting ways to sneak a scarab into the soup tureen. Albert, however, is oblivious to squeamishness. Every newly acquired specimen is greeted with the kind of reverence most people reserve for newborn babies or championship horses. He insists you admire their delicate elytra while you're just wondering how to pronounce elytra in polite company. Albert's obsession with order doesn't stop at beetles or museums. He's got a filing system for his filing systems. He color-codes your correspondence, designs elaborate schedules for the staff, and once proposed cataloguing the royal linen closets by thread count and historical significance. You can't sneeze in Buckingham Palace without someone recording it in triplicate and filing it in the unexpected weather events drawer. The servants are quietly exhausted. Your mother-in-law suspects Albert is trying to alphabetize the family tree, and you're pretty sure he's drawn up a detailed map of every hedge in the gardens, just in case one of the children tries to get lost. The decorating doesn't stop at paperwork. If you let your guard down, you'll return to find Albert personally rearranging the furniture, testing curtain fabrics for optimal sunlight, and experimenting with a new kind of footstool. Each experiment comes with a footnote, 2 sketches, and a suggested reading list. You sometimes wonder if he's actually relaxing or just conducting a royal-scale research project. Of course, Albert's relentless tinkering has its benefits. Thanks to him, your homes are cleaner, your walls better insulated, and your children can recite the Latin names of at least 8 local beetles. Guests are often startled to find themselves at dinner discussing the relative merits of museum ventilation systems, but at least no one is ever bored. The staff occasionally reminisce about the simpler days. when the only surprise in a drawing room was whether the dog had chewed through the wainscoting. In the end, you learn to embrace Albert's obsessions, even if it means living in a perpetual state of renovation. You smile politely at the latest museum plan, admire a beetle from a safe distance, and try not to trip over the scale model of the Crystal Palace in the hall. Because if marriage teaches you anything, it's that every partnership is a mix of chaos and compromise. And in Victorian England, sometimes love is measured in glass cases, catalogued curtains, and the unwavering devotion of a husband who really, really likes beetles. You write thousands of letters to your beloved, even though he's just down the hall. Expect poetry, veiled criticisms, and at least 3 underlines when he's annoyed. Welcome to Victorian romance, Royal Edition, where I love you is always delivered in perfect penmanship, preferably in triplicate, and with just enough subtlety to keep historians guessing for centuries. You and Albert are the original power couple of the British Empire, running the world, raising 9 children, and, between formal dinners and state business, communicating your deepest feelings via a never-ending flurry of notes. Forget texting under the table. This is a marathon of stationery, a courtship played out in cursive. It starts innocently enough. Albert leaves you a sweet note about the weather. The sun shines most graciously today, dearest Victoria. You reply with a quick, "God bless you, darling, but don't forget your scarf." Soon, though, these little exchanges become a full-blown literary project. If you're not writing notes, you're thinking about writing notes, or rereading yesterday's note to check for hidden meanings. At breakfast, a gentle rebuke about his socks, Albert, the blue ones are simply not becoming, becomes the subject of 3 follow-up letters, each more dramatic than the last. Because in the palace, everything is heightened when you live and work together, surrounded by staff, children, and an endless supply of relatives who never knock. The written word is your secret weapon. Sometimes, the notes are poetry. Sometimes, they are a running tally of household irritations. You left your beetles in the parlour again. I do hope they enjoyed the opera. Other times, they're a mixture of both, delicately stitched with passive aggression. My beloved, you are the light of my life. However, the light in your study is still burning at 2 in the morning, and the butler is beginning to show signs of distress. You develop a secret code. 3 underlines means, take this seriously. A double exclamation point means someone will be sacked if this continues. And a note signed with only your first initial means you're too annoyed to finish the whole name. It's a system as elaborate as your family tree. If modern couples have emoji, you have carefully chosen stationery and an escalating array of fountain pens. Of course, the palace staff are all in on it. The footmen know to deliver your notes with solemn ceremony, as if each one contains the fate of the empire. Maids occasionally intercept letters and add their own commentary. Nothing says royal romance like a passing housemaid muttering, "About time, Your Majesty." The children, ever curious, try to decipher the code, assuming it's some sort of treasure map or instructions for a secret midnight feast. Once, a note about Albert's untidy desk ends up inspiring a household-wide campaign for cleanliness, led by a 6-year-old princess with a paper hat. Sometimes, the letters are sincere, tender confessions of love or longing. More often, though, they're an elaborate dance around household tensions. My dearest Albert, while your efforts at rearranging the drapery are most admirable, I do beg you not to use the state regalia as curtain ties. And Albert, ever the engineer, responds with diagrams and proposals, a more efficient system for curtain management, with minimal use of ceremonial sashes. Occasionally, a genuine argument breaks out entirely on paper, exchanged in real time across the breakfast table with all the solemnity of a peace treaty negotiation. Yet, for all the drama, the flood of notes keeps your relationship afloat. It's a record of 2 busy, stubborn, affectionate people trying to stay close in a house full of distractions and an empire full of demands. At the end of each day, you find a new letter tucked under your pillow, sometimes a poem, sometimes a reminder to schedule the chimney sweep, sometimes just a doodle of a particularly beloved beetle. It's love, Victorian style, complicated, wordy, and never, ever dull. And when you look back, you'll realize that every underlined word and pointed dearest was just your way of saying, I'm here, I'm listening, and I still love you, even when you use the wrong ink. Everyone wants to know what happens behind the velvet drapes. And by everyone, I mean every bored duchess within 100 miles. There are rumors, there are diaries, and there's that one time you both accidentally wore the same dressing gown to breakfast. Life as a royal couple means you can never truly close the door, not on your bedroom, not on your secrets, and certainly not on the endless tide of palace gossip. In Victorian England, privacy is a privilege enjoyed by no one in Buckingham Palace, least of all the monarch and her consort. Every late-night candle, every giggle from behind closed doors, every quiet conversation echoes through the halls and somehow multiplies before it reaches the eager ears of the court. Even the velvet drapes seem to tremble in anticipation. It's not just the staff. Your extended family, a legion of courtiers, and a rotating cast of minor aristocrats all have nothing better to do than speculate on your marital bliss, or imagined lack thereof. Did you take breakfast together today? Did Prince Albert leave the Queen's apartments before the footman arrived? Why are there 2 cups on the bedside table, and who left a German poetry book under the pillow? These questions circulate at breakneck speed, and you suspect there's an entire subcommittee of duchesses whose sole job is to discuss the potential meanings of your nightwear. Sometimes, the rumors are harmless and almost sweet. There are sighs of contentment when it's reported that the Queen and Prince are seen walking arm in the garden, or that laughter was overheard from the royal apartments. But more often, the stories turn scandalous. Did Prince Albert really insist on designing the royal mattress himself for maximum mutual comfort? Did Victoria really write a poem so steamy that the Archbishop was consulted? Is there a secret passage from the Queen's rooms to the library? Or, as one particularly inventive cousin claims, to the kitchens for late-night snacks? No comment. Then there's the diaries. You keep a journal, of course, because you're Victorian, and documenting every emotion is as essential as breathing. Albert keeps one too, sometimes filling it with love notes, sometimes with diagrams of new ventilation systems. Inevitably, someone tries to peek at these entries. The staff claim accidental discoveries of scribbled notes, while certain relations mysteriously start quoting lines that sound suspiciously familiar. It's a daily exercise in hiding your diary from prying eyes, sometimes in the wardrobe, sometimes under a stack of official papers, and once, in desperation, inside a decorative soup tureen. As for wardrobe mishaps, well, the less said the better. With 9 children, a rotating team of night nurses, and a calendar that includes everything from midnight state banquets to impromptu family concerts, you and Albert are bound to have the occasional fashion overlap. That infamous morning when you both appeared at breakfast in matching tartan dressing gowns is still discussed by the kitchen staff as if it were a major diplomatic incident. For weeks, the tabloids speculated. Was it a sign of unbreakable affection, marital monotony, or simply a shortage of clean laundry? It was laundry, but why spoil the fun? Through all this, you do your best to keep your composure. The official answer to any question about bedroom life is a polite, stony silence, accompanied by a small, enigmatic smile. You have learned that the less you reveal, the wilder the gossip becomes. And there's a certain satisfaction in watching everyone else fill in the blanks. Sometimes you and Albert read the latest rumors to each other over cocoa and collapse in giggles, inventing even more ridiculous tales for your own amusement. Still, the constant attention is exhausting. There are nights you dream of escaping to a tiny cottage where the only witness to your life is a sleepy cat. But this is royal marriage. Every curtain is a stage. Every doorknob, a potential headline. Every whispered goodnight echoing through a palace full of eager listeners. You learn to treasure the quiet moments, the hurried conversations, the private jokes, the mornings when you get to be just two people in love, no matter what the world is saying outside the velvet drapes. Because in the end, you realize the most outrageous scandal is simply managing to stay happily married, year after year, under the watchful eyes of all of London. Prince Albert's family brings enough drama to fill an opera house. From dueling uncles to opinionated aunts, every dinner is a diplomatic incident waiting to happen. Step into the Victorian palace dining room, where a formal dinner isn't just about soup and etiquette, it's about navigating an emotional obstacle course constructed by generations of tightly wound Teutonic relatives. You're Queen Victoria, and you already have your hands full with your own relatives, but nothing quite prepares you for the onslaught of the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha clan. Every time you hear the phrase family gathering, your blood pressure rises and you consider whether feigning illness is an acceptable royal tradition. Let's start with the uncles. There are more of them than you can reasonably count, each with their own title, agenda, and simmering sibling rivalry. These aren't the kindly, pipe-smoking uncles of storybooks. These are the type who have opinions about everything, from British parliamentary procedure to the proper temperature of the soup, and aren't shy about voicing them in German, French, and occasionally 3 other languages, often at the same time. One will loudly argue that English breakfasts are an abomination, while another will wax poetic about the superiority of continental cheese. You sit there, practicing your royal smile, while mentally calculating how many years you have left until retirement. Then there are the aunts. The Saxe-Coburg-Gotha aunts have honed the art of passive-aggressive commentary to Olympic levels. They can critique your choice of wallpaper, your hairstyle, and your child-rearing philosophy all in a single sentence. "Ah, Victoria, you let the children play outdoors?" In our day, fresh air was considered quite vulgar. The way they look at your tea service, you'd think you'd just served mud in a royal chalice. They travel in packs and treat every family dinner like a strategic summit, complete with whispered asides and coded glances. If you try to change the subject, they'll steer it back to their favorite topic, how things were always better in Coburg. Family dinners become masterclasses in diplomacy. Albert, ever the peacemaker, tries to steer the conversation toward neutral topics, but it's like trying to herd cats. Cats with titles, axes to grind, and a working knowledge of international trade policy. You're never quite sure if you're attending a meal or mediating a border dispute. One minute you're discussing the weather, the next there's a debate about the legitimacy of someone's great-grandfather's marriage certificate. Children are not immune to this atmosphere. Your offspring are paraded out like prizes at the county fair, each expected to recite poems or demonstrate their progress on the piano, while 3 aunts comment loudly on posture, diction, and whether Bertie is looking a little English around the nose. Your children, normally impervious to royal pressure, suddenly develop stage fright and a sudden urge to hide under the table with the family dog. And let's not forget the gifts. Every family visit means gifts, but not the fun kind. These are ornate, impractical objects that come with detailed instructions and veiled insults. A hand-painted vase to brighten up your rather severe parlour, or a set of German cookbooks for when English food inevitably disappoints. Thank you, Aunt Adelaide, for the subtle reminder that nothing in Britain quite matches up to continental perfection. The staff have their own version of the in-law Olympics, placing bets on how many courses will be served before the first international incident, and whether the evening will end in toasts or tears. The butlers develop elaborate signal systems to warn each other of incoming drama, and the footmen are trained in strategic retreat, able to vanish at the first sign of a heated debate over the merits of Prussian school systems. By the end of every visit, you're exhausted, your nerves are frayed, and your diary is filled with new material for the next generation of scandal. Yet, in a strange way, it's also comforting, Because if there's one thing royals and commoners alike can agree on, it's that family, no matter how grand or how German, will always keep life interesting, and dinner just a little too long. Congratulations, you survived another round of the in-law Olympics. Gold medal in smiling through gritted teeth. Imagine introducing the Christmas tree to England, only to be accused of ruining traditional holidays. Suddenly, you're in the middle of a cultural turf war fought with tinsel and gingerbread. It's the 1840s, and as Queen Victoria, you'd think your biggest Christmas worry would be whether the roast goose is cooked through, or if the palace choir will hit the high notes during God Rest Ye Merry, Gentlemen. But no, your main headache is that your husband, Prince Albert, has imported an exotic fir tree from Germany, and now half of England thinks you're personally leading the charge against mince pies, figgy pudding, and the very soul of British winter. Let's rewind. You want to make Albert feel at home. The poor man has endured a steady stream of jokes about sausages and beetles since he arrived. So you agree to let him set up a little piece of Coburg tradition. A Christmas tree. You picture something tasteful, a lovely, green, fragrant pine, a few pretty ornaments, perhaps a gingerbread man or two. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, as it turns out. The tree arrives in all its glory and is promptly installed in Windsor Castle, dripping with glass baubles, sweets, and enough candles to qualify as a minor fire hazard. The children are enchanted. The staff are bewildered. The English press, however, goes absolutely feral. Within days, the newspapers are screaming that Her Majesty has abandoned good Christian custom in favor of foreign pagan shrubbery. You'd think you'd replaced the baby Jesus with a bratwurst. There are caricatures in the papers of you and Albert waltzing around the tree, and at least one cartoon of the Archbishop of Canterbury weeping gently into his pudding. It's not just the papers. Your court is in an uproar. Old Lady Throckmorton, who hasn't smiled since the Regency, is seen muttering about the Germanification of Christmas. A duke's wife insists that in her family, they do Christmas the proper way, which apparently involves an alarming number of boiled things and no greenery at all. Some courtiers boycott the tree entirely, refusing to set foot in the drawing room while that monstrosity is present. Albert, for his part, is both flattered and horrified. He gives a series of earnest lectures about the history of Christmas trees in Germany, but only succeeds in convincing everyone that Germans will hang anything on a fir tree if given half a chance. He organizes tree decorating parties, demonstrating proper bauble placement and the art of stringing popcorn. You suspect he's secretly delighted to be causing a national controversy, if only because it distracts from ongoing debates about royal wallpaper. Meanwhile, every mother in England is now fielding endless questions from her children. Why can't we have a tree like the Queen? The country is divided. Some families set up their own trees and brag about being continental. Others grumble about how Christmas was better in the days before pine needles. There are reports of an underground trade in tinsel and rumours that Prince Albert is personally delivering fir trees to royalist supporters in the dead of night. Even your own children are swept up in the drama. The younger ones sneak down in their nightgowns to add more gingerbread to the branches, while the older ones compose satirical carols about Mother's Christmas sprout. The palace cat claims the lower boughs as its new territory, and at least 2 spaniels have to be rescued from garlands. But here's the twist. By next year, everyone wants a Christmas tree. The papers quietly shift from outrage to approval, and society ladies outdo one another with ever taller, ever sparklier evergreens. The whole nation decides it was their idea all along. Christmas is saved, the holidays are sparklier, and Prince Albert is finally, briefly, left in peace to reorganize the ornament boxes. So, if you're ever accused of ruining Christmas by introducing something new, just remember Queen Victoria. Blamed one year, beloved the next, and always one tinsel-covered branch ahead of the mob. Forget healthy eating. Victorian banquets are exercises in endurance. There's more gravy than sense, and someone always brings pickled tongue, your digestion is never the same. Let's set the scene. You are Queen Victoria, presiding over a table the length of a cricket pitch. Illuminated by so many candles, the room is at constant risk of spontaneous combustion. Tonight's menu is a parade of questionable culinary decisions, handcrafted by a chef whose only goal seems to be proving how many courses a human stomach can withstand. The royal household claims these meals display British splendor and hospitality. But really, they're tests of courage and intestinal fortitude. The meal begins innocently enough with soup, except it's always some strange, lukewarm concoction, served from a tureen so ornate you're afraid to touch it. Maybe it's turtle, maybe it's eel, maybe it's essence of beef extracted by a process you absolutely don't want described at the table. You sip politely while Prince Albert investigates the soup's viscosity, already plotting ways to improve it through German engineering. Your mother-in-law eyes you from across the table, checking to see if you'll flinch at the floating garnish. Then come the meats. Roasts, boiled joints, game birds still glaring at you with tiny glassy eyes. Everything arrives swimming in an ocean of gravy. There is brown gravy, white gravy, mysterious green gravy that no one dares question. Your plate soon resembles a miniature Thames in flood season. God help you if you accidentally request a small portion. Servants heap on more, as if feeding you is a matter of national pride. Somewhere in the middle of all this, a footman delivers a dish of pickled tongue, which is politely passed around but never eaten, except by that one uncle who claims it aids digestion. The vegetables offer no relief. Forget crunchy salads or light steamed greens. Victorian vegetables are either boiled to oblivion or marinated in vinegar until they resemble science experiments. The only thing fresh about them is the garden dirt stubbornly clinging to the potatoes. The royal children poke suspiciously at their plates, hoping no one will notice when a sprig of limp cabbage is discreetly slipped to the dog under the table. The dog, for the record, is less picky than most of the guests. And just when you think you've survived, it's time for dessert. Multiple desserts. Puddings that wobble, tarts that ooze, cakes heavy enough to serve as doorstops. There's always a trifle assembled with such enthusiasm that half the fruit sinks to the bottom, creating a kind of archaeological dig with every spoonful. You attempt a delicate bite, but one taste of burnt sugar or suspiciously alcoholic custard sends you straight back to the gin, which, by the way, flows as freely as the gossip. No matter the occasion, there's a drink for every course and a toast for every minor victory, until you're convinced even the fruit bowl might be tipsy. After 2 hours of relentless eating, conversation turns to the inevitable topic: digestive distress. No one ever admits defeat, but by the third course, most guests are eyeing the exits, planning their post-banquet remedies. Someone will always recommend a brisk walk in the gardens. Another will insist on just a nip of bitters. You, meanwhile, wonder if it would be considered undignified to simply lie down under the table and surrender to the effects of pickled eggs and plum pudding. There is no escape. The servants glide around, refilling plates and glasses, encouraging more, always more. You muster your royal dignity, smile through the indigestion, and attempt polite conversation about international affairs, all while mentally composing a letter to the palace doctor. Dearest sir, please send more bicarbonate of soda. By the end of the night, you stagger away from the table, trousers and corset straining, vowing never to eat again. Until breakfast, of course, when the cycle begins anew. Welcome to the royal diet, a relentless, gravy-soaked marathon, where survival depends on the strength of your constitution and the sheer force of your will. Digestion, like monarchy, is not for the faint of heart. You're expected to set the moral tone for an entire empire. But your favorite hobbies are theatrical, sobbing, dramatic fainting, and occasionally hiding in the garden to avoid your children. As Queen Victoria, your life is a public performance, whether you like it or not. Every sigh, sniffle, or slightly raised eyebrow is dissected by the press. analysed by ministers, and whispered about by duchesses with nothing better to do. The country expects you to be the granite pillar of Victorian values, dignified, industrious, and always, always modest. The reality? You're just as human as the next person, except your mood swings can spark headlines from Scotland to South Africa. Let's start with mourning. No one in history has ever mourned quite as hard, or as publicly, as you. When Prince Albert dies, you turn grief into a national pastime. You wear black for decades, set a new fashion for jet jewellery, and teach the entire empire that wearing colour is basically a crime against decency. People across England ask themselves, would the Queen approve, before buying anything brighter than charcoal? Even the palace cat looks more sombre than usual. And if anyone dares to suggest you try mauve, well, let's just say they won't be on the guest list for the next garden party. But even before the mourning, you were already a master of melodrama. As a young queen, you learned that a well-timed faint or a gentle sob could rearrange the entire royal schedule. If the ministers bored you, you'd declare yourself fatigued by the cares of state and retreat to your room for a restorative nap, with heavy curtains drawn, obviously. The staff became experts at decoding your emotional weather. Was it going to be a teary day? A day for huffy walks? Or, heaven help them, an afternoon of impassioned piano playing? If they heard you sighing at the window, they knew better than to disturb you, or to leave any crumpets within arm's reach. Then there's the mischief. For all the public displays of piety and seriousness, you are not above a little royal trickery. Sometimes you escape the endless parade of advisors, tutors, and offspring by disappearing into the palace gardens, hiding behind a yew hedge, while your children and various German cousins play an elaborate game of hide-and-seek, with you as the secret, undefeated champion. You delight in practical jokes, slipping a silly note to a maid, switching Prince Albert's favourite pen, or rearranging the flower displays just to see if anyone notices. The court may be stuffy, but you find your moments of rebellion in the small things. A smirk, a sly wink, a mysteriously vanished tea cozy. Still, your public image is a paradox. Part stern matriarch, part emotional open book. The press follows your every move, breathlessly reporting on the Queen's grief or the Queen's recovery, as if the fate of the empire hangs on the colour of your handkerchief. You are painted as the moral compass of the nation, but you know that sometimes your compass points due nap time. Even your children get in on the act, mimicking your sighs and strategic fainting spells whenever they want to get out of arithmetic. Despite all the melodrama and mischief, you manage to hold the empire together, often by sheer force of will and the ability to inspire awe, affection, and occasional exasperation in everyone around you. You teach the Victorians how to mourn, how to dress, and, yes, even how to laugh at themselves. And if that means you get to spend the odd afternoon hiding from responsibility in the rose garden, well, that's just another royal prerogative. So the next time you see a painting of Queen Victoria looking stern and severe, remember, beneath that black crepe and solemn crown beats the heart of a woman who could out-dramatize any soap opera and still find time for a quick giggle behind the greenhouse. Mourning, melodrama, mischief, sometimes all before breakfast. Albert is handsome, talented, and slightly obsessed with inventing things. He's adored by some, resented by others, and always has a new scheme for organizing the royal closets. Let's paint a picture. You're Queen Victoria, and your husband isn't just a prince. He's an ambitious, over-caffeinated whirlwind of ideas, blueprints, and earnest improvement. Prince Albert isn't content with being a decorative consort. No, he has to be useful. And in Victorian England, useful means everything from rethinking the heating system to rewriting the schedule for royal pigeon racing. Yes, really. The public can't quite decide whether Albert is the empire's greatest asset or the world's most determined German exchange student. On the one hand, He's undeniably dashing, thick, glossy hair, sharp features, and the kind of intense gaze that makes even the stoniest dowager duchess swoon. He composes music, sketches gardens, and designs furniture, all before you've finished your morning tea. He's the Victorian Renaissance man. Hands-on with the kids, hands-off with scandal, and never, ever off-duty. But it's the schemes that people talk about. Albert approaches life as if he's been personally tasked by the universe to fix everything. Leaky roof in the West Wing. He's already up there with a wrench, a diagram, and an essay on the optimal pitch of Victorian gutters. Too many moths in the linen closet? Albert launches a moth eradication protocol involving lavender sachets, airtight storage, and an unfortunate experiment with imported Hungarian lizards. Some of his efforts are brilliant. The Great Exhibition of 1851, for instance, which turns Hyde Park into a glittering cathedral of glass and progress. Others, like the time he tried to reorganize the palace servants' schedules with color-coded charts, mostly result in mass confusion, and several butlers pretending to have mysterious illnesses. To his admirers, Albert is the model of modernity. He's not content with endless banquets and ceremonial ribbon cutting. He wants to make a difference. He campaigns for better education, cleaner housing, and public health reforms that are a century ahead of their time. His efforts at raising the moral tone of the royal court make the newspapers swoon. Ladies across Europe keep his portrait tucked into their prayer books, while forward-thinking gentlemen secretly wish they'd thought of underfloor heating first. But not everyone is charmed. Some of the court resent his influence, muttering that he's too German, too clever, or simply too enthusiastic about filing systems. British politicians look askance at his reforms, wary of a foreign prince meddling in the affairs of the world's most powerful nation. Even the palace staff need time to adjust to the daily onslaught of Albert's new and improved procedures, especially the footman who once walked in on the prince color-coding socks and now checks for secret schedules hidden in the laundry baskets. Albert's relationship with the public is complicated. At times, he's the darling of the press, a modern man for a modern era, devoted to his wife and children, sober and scandal-free. But woe betide anyone who stands between Albert and a new project. He has the energy of a puppy and the focus of a scientist, which means you're just as likely to find him buried in engineering manuals as you are leading the children on a nature walk through the muddiest part of the park. His letters are dense with ideas, cross-referenced and underlined, peppered with requests for more funding, and just a few minor changes to the layout of Windsor Castle. Privately, you learn to love his quirks. The endless tinkering, the impromptu concerts, the slightly neurotic way he keeps track of the family's sock consumption. He may be an overachiever, but he's your overachiever. Thoughtful, idealistic, and quietly delighted when one of his many experiments actually works. Sure, the closets are more organized, but so is your life. And at the end of each chaotic day, you're grateful for a husband who'd rather invent a better mousetrap than attend yet another dull reception. So, perfect husband or overachiever? Why not both? In the grand sweep of royal history, it's always better to have a partner with too many ideas than not enough. And if he invents a better toast rack along the way, well, that's just a bonus. Every sneeze is front-page news. Your choice of hat is analyzed, your moods are speculated upon, and there's a rumor going around that you only smile once a year. Welcome to the Victorian age of tabloid hysteria, where you, Queen Victoria, are the original celebrity influencer, whether you want to be or not. Forget social media. In your world, every movement is tracked by a battalion of caricaturists, columnists, and bored busybodies who can turn a minor wardrobe malfunction into a crisis for the empire. You can't so much as peek through the palace curtains without someone sketching your silhouette and labeling it Her Majesty's new mood. Pensive. The press takes its job seriously, or at least noisily. Newspapers churn out a daily diet of gossip, half-truths, and the occasional outright fabrication, Queen's cough causes cabinet concern. Or palace sources say, marmalade crisis at breakfast. It's relentless. When you wear black, the papers say you're in mourning. When you wear mauve, they say you're in rebellion. Smile too much, and you're hiding something. Frown, and you're plotting the fall of civilization. According to the London Illustrated News, you possess only 3 facial expressions: stern, very stern, and possibly thinking about sacking a duke. But it's not just your face. Your hats are national news. The style, size, and number of feathers attached are debated by editorial boards as if international peace depended on them. If you're spotted with a new bonnet, every milliner in the country is asked for comment. Did you choose velvet or straw? Was it a symbol of imperial pride? Or just an attempt to cover up a bad hair day? Somewhere, a columnist is drafting a theory. It's not only the fashion columns either. Political cartoonists have a field day with your every appearance, drawing you as a formidable matron, an imperious queen, or, on a slow news day, a tiny figure dwarfed by the palace's looming scandals. Your children, too, are dragged into the spectacle. Their teething troubles, childhood fevers, and every public tantrum become metaphors for the state of the nation. Princess Alice cried at tea. Is Britain headed for disaster? There are even whispers that Prince Albert's collection of beetles might hold secret clues to the future of Europe. Sometimes, the headlines are just plain absurd. A slow news week might see the press speculating about your dog's diet, or whether you secretly prefer French cheese to good British cheddar. You once made the mistake of waving at a crowd with your left hand. By morning, the Times was speculating that you'd broken your right wrist in a tragic mutton accident. The rumors never end. There's even a persistent urban legend that you only smile once a year, usually on the birthday of your favorite horse. Of course, there's little hope for privacy. You start to suspect the palace walls are paper thin, or that at least one of the potted plants in the corridor is a disguised reporter. The staff have developed a code for warning you when the press is lurking nearby. The lilies are blooming in the garden. A footman will murmur, and you know it's time to put on your most neutral expression and avoid mentioning the state of the royal plumbing. You do your best to maintain an air of dignified indifference. You smile when necessary, frown when appropriate, and learn to live with the fact that even your coughs can become the subject of parliamentary debate. Sometimes you fight back with your own brand of mischief, releasing a decoy story about your hat collection or leaving a suspiciously ordinary note where you know it will be discovered by a particularly persistent gossip columnist. In the end, you learn that being queen means living life on stage, always performing for an audience you can't see but can definitely hear, especially when they're shouting about the shape of your umbrella. The rumors may be relentless, the coverage over the top, but you carry on with regal composure, knowing that history will remember you for a lot more than your hat choices or the number of times you sneeze in public. And as you settle down for another day of royal duties, you can't help but think, at least in your world, scandal never sleeps. 9 children means 9 different parenting strategies, all of them contradictory. Each child will later blame you for at least one European war. The royal nursery is basically a diplomatic powder keg with teething rings. Welcome to the royal parenting gauntlet, where the only certainty is that whatever you do, someone, your mother-in-law, your husband, your own children, and at least 3 European monarchs will have strong opinions about it. As Queen Victoria, you are expected to set the standard for family values across the empire, even though your own household is a lively chaos of rival personalities, sibling alliances, and more governesses than you have fingers. It all starts with intention. You want your children to be strong, moral, and, if possible, not a complete diplomatic disaster when they grow up and marry into other royal families. You have ideas. You really do. But those ideas quickly run aground on the shoals of reality, because no 2 children are alike. and royal blood seems to bring out extra stubbornness in every one. Bertie, the future Edward VII, is a lovable rascal who can charm the butlers out of biscuits and turn a 10-minute history lesson into a wrestling match. Vicky, your eldest, is clever, ambitious, and liable to correct her father's German accent at the dinner table. Then there are the others. Artistic, dreamy Alice. Prank. Loving Arthur. High-spirited Leopold. And the rest, all with distinct agendas, allergies, and varying relationships with spinach. There is a strict schedule, at least on paper. The royal day begins with cold baths, character building, followed by lessons in multiple languages, a breakfast heavy on porridge and light on joy, and a daily constitutional walk, rain or shine, plague or palace scandal. You insist on moral instruction, Latin declensions, and daily practice of both the piano and the art of not spilling jam on the upholstery. Albert, ever the German reformer, designs elaborate educational charts, complete with color-coded merit stars and periodic surprise quizzes. The nannies, on the other hand, just want the children to survive without breaking anything too expensive. But the real challenge is that the rules change hourly, sometimes mid-sentence. One moment, you're demanding strict discipline, no dessert unless the homework is finished, no raising voices in the nursery, and absolutely no riding horses down the main corridor. The next, you're overcome with affection and declare a holiday for anyone who can recite Wordsworth from memory, which, let's face it, is mostly you. Meanwhile, Albert is inventing new ways to measure childhood progress, including a device for calculating average daily obedience that no one can actually explain. You also have to contend with constant interference from well-meaning relatives. The Duchess of Kent pops in to deliver contradictory advice about continental upbringing, which seems to involve more layers of wool and fewer cookies. Albert's family sends long letters from Germany with urgent warnings about the dangers of too much fresh air. Even the Prime Minister sometimes weighs in, discreetly suggesting it would be good for Anglo-Prussian relations if Bertie would stop pulling his sister's hair in public. Then there's the public scrutiny. Every child's cold becomes the subject of heated newspaper debate. Every tantrum is analysed as a sign of future instability in Europe. A bad hair day can trigger rumours of a constitutional crisis. You can't take them for a picnic in Hyde Park without reporters speculating about what sandwiches are a coded message to the French. Sometimes, it's enough to make you want to swap places with the palace cook and disappear behind a mountain of potatoes. Despite all the rules, contradictions, and international incidents, the royal nursery is full of love, messy, noisy, occasionally exasperated love. You read stories, kiss bruised knees, and manage to squeeze in bedtime cuddles even when you're tired enough to sleep standing up. The children may be future monarchs and diplomats, but they are also your little chaos makers, capable of turning the world's most powerful palace into a den of laughter, shrieks, and the occasional strategic pudding fight. In the end, you do your best. You muddle through, knowing that history will judge you, probably harshly, but hoping that your children, one day, will remember not just the rules and the lectures, but the warmth and absurdity of a royal childhood spent in the diplomatic powder keg with teething rings and a mother who loved them, even in the midst of empire. When Prince Albert dies, you break the record for most dramatic mourning. Black lace becomes high fashion, and you refuse to smile for the rest of the decade. The nation worries you might outmourn the funeral industry. Let's set the scene. It's 1861, and Prince Albert, your beloved husband, advisor, and co-conspirator in household organization, is gone. The palace turns as silent as the tomb. Courtiers tiptoe through the halls. Footmen adopt a more somber bow, and even the corgis seem to bark in a minor key. You, Queen Victoria, take mourning to levels never before seen outside of Shakespearean tragedy, and frankly, you never intend to come back down. The rituals begin immediately. Out go the coloured silks and brocades, In comes an endless supply of black crepe, jet beads, and veils so thick they could filter out sunlight and half the London smog. You order the entire court into mourning. Not just your own family, but ministers, staff, and anyone who expects to see the inside of Buckingham Palace before Christmas. If you thought black was slimming, wait until you see what it does to the mood of an entire empire. Mourning becomes your full-time occupation. There are rules for everything. What to wear, when to weep, and even how to look dramatically overcome at all public functions. You set new records for funereal protocol. 2 years for widows, a year for mothers, 6 months for second cousins, and until further notice for the Queen. The dressmakers can barely keep up with the demand for mourning wear. Shops run out of black ribbon. Mourning jewellery, especially with locks of hair, becomes the hottest trend. Even the royal stationery turns a respectable, inky black. The rest of England is exhausted just trying to keep pace. The newspapers are beside themselves. Her Majesty's grief. A nation in shadow, the headlines shriek. Cartoonists immortalize your silhouette in 1,000 shades of gloom. Editorials speculate that the Queen may never again be seen in anything other than widow's weeds. You're accused of being both too emotional and too cold, too public and too withdrawn. There's even a rumor that you've banned laughter in the palace. And the kitchen staff start whispering ghost stories just to break the tension. But it's not just a fashion statement. You pour your grief into every part of your life. You banish musical instruments, cancel balls, and threaten to turn Balmoral Castle into the world's largest mausoleum. You withdraw from public life, delegating duties and appearing only when absolutely necessary, always draped in black, always with that haunted, sorrowful gaze that becomes a national emblem. Even your family starts to worry that the mourning will never end. The children tiptoe around you, unsure if they should offer hugs or keep a respectful distance. Ministers conduct state business in whispers, afraid that anything louder than a gentle murmur will trigger a fresh wave of tears. Of course, the public reaction is mixed. Some admire your devotion, holding you up as the model of wifely constancy and Victorian virtue. Others grumble that the country needs a queen, not a professional mourner. Shops selling coloured ribbons go out of business. London milliners whisper that they've never seen so much black lace in their lives. Even the dogs at Sandringham seem to sigh more often. In private, though, mourning becomes something else. A shield, a sanctuary, and, at times, a slightly guilty indulgence. You hide in your rooms, write endless letters to Albert, and indulge in dramatic, candlelit reminiscing. There are days when the sadness is overwhelming, and days when it feels like an old, familiar coat. Your grief becomes your closest companion, the one thing you never have to share with a demanding court or nosy press. Eventually, the rest of the world moves on, but you remain defiantly in black, determined to set your own timeline for healing. Your mourning becomes legendary, a mix of scandal, fashion, and fierce, stubborn love. Even now, when people think of Queen Victoria, they see the black dress, the solemn face, and the woman who refused to let the world forget how much she'd lost. Mourning, you discover, can be both a burden and a crown. And no one, before or since, has ever worn it quite like you. After Albert's death, you find yourself oddly attached to your Scottish servant, John Brown. The rumours fly. Is it love, friendship, or just a shared appreciation for strong whiskey and outdoor walks? Let's set the scene. It's the bleak years after Prince Albert's death, and Buckingham Palace feels emptier than ever. The halls echo with memories, and every velvet curtain seems to drape just a bit heavier. You, Queen Victoria, have become the embodiment of mourning. Then along comes John Brown, a burly, brusque, and completely unroyal Scotsman with an accent thick enough to butter toast and a disposition that's more Highland cattle than courtier. At first, Brown's presence is practical. He's assigned to manage your horses and guide you on your daily walks at Balmoral, but he quickly becomes much more: a confidant, a guardian, and, most scandalous of all, a source of genuine laughter. John Brown doesn't care for etiquette. He addresses you as woman when you're stubborn, scolds you for walking in the mud without proper boots, and, perhaps worst of all, dares to treat you like an ordinary human being. For a monarch surrounded by sycophants and yes-men, it's nothing short of intoxicating. Rumours blossom as fast as the Scottish heather. The court is scandalised. "Have you heard how close the Queen is with that Brown fellow?" whispers Lady Borrington to anyone who will listen. Soon, the staff invent a dozen nicknames: the Queen's Highlander, the Keeper of the Royal Mood, and, behind closed doors, His Majesty John. Newspapers, ever hungry for a royal scandal, send sketch artists to Balmoral in hopes of glimpsing the pair striding side by side, both with matching frowns and the sort of wild hair that suggests neither of them is interested in palace protocol. You do little to calm the waters. In fact, you fuel the fire by insisting Brown accompany you on private trips, serve as your personal attendant, and even bring you whiskey when the palace sherry won't do. His straightforward manner and rough humour break through your grief. Letters exchanged between you, some formal, some worryingly informal, are pored over by every amateur codebreaker in the British Isles. "Dearest Brown, fetch my plaid and leave the advisers behind." Is it an order? An invitation? A Victorian emoji? The nation demands to know. Of course, everyone has an opinion. Your children are divided. Some are grateful that Brown coaxes you out of perpetual mourning. Others are horrified that he sits too close at dinner and calls you lass when he thinks no one can hear. Ministers wring their hands and send anxious memoranda about the appearance of propriety, while your ladies-in-waiting struggle to hide their delight whenever Brown tells an off-colour joke in front of the Archbishop. Prince Albert's ghost, if he's watching, is probably equal parts amused and appalled. As for you, you relish it. For the first time in years, you find yourself looking forward to muddy walks, brisk air, and the kind of companionship that asks nothing from you except your honest self. With Brown, you can grumble, stomp, laugh, and forget, if only for an hour, that you are the queen of an empire with a world's worth of expectations resting on your tiny, black-clad shoulders. He challenges you, protects you, and, let's be honest, probably saves you from vanishing completely into your grief. In public, you remain the iron-willed widow, black lace and all. In private, you let yourself be a little softer, a little sillier. When the world is too much, Brown is there with a sturdy arm and a sharper tongue. The press speculates, society clutches its pearls, and you simply carry on, forging a friendship or something more that defies every rule of royal decorum. So, was it love? Was it scandal? Or was it just two stubborn souls, battered by loss, finding solace in each other's company? Whiskey flask always at the ready. Historians still argue, biographers still hint, and the world still wonders. But for you, Queen Victoria, John Brown was your not-so-secret secret. Proof that even in the shadow of mourning, a little laughter and a lot of Scottish stubbornness can bring you back to life. The children grow up to become monarchs, troublemakers, and fodder for endless gossip columns. Your family Christmas photos could start a diplomatic crisis. Welcome to the after-party of Queen Victoria's legacy. A never-ending parade of royal birthdays, weddings, feuds, and, naturally, spectacular public scandals. You'd think that, after wrangling 9 children, surviving a continent's worth of in-laws, and weathering Victorian tabloid storms, you'd be allowed a little peace in your old age. But no. Peace is a concept that vanished from Buckingham Palace around the time your 7th child learned to write their own press release. First, let's talk about those children. You had 9, and each one managed to carve their own path through European history like a teething baby through a fresh scone. Vicky marries the future German emperor and promptly sets about reforming the Prussian court, much to the horror of Prussian grandmothers everywhere. Bertie, destined to become Edward VII, spends his youth collecting mistresses and making headlines with his suspiciously enthusiastic attendance at Parisian dinner parties. Princess Alice marries into the House of Hesse, and in classic Victorian style, raises children who become both saints and eventually tragic news stories themselves. Your sons and daughters become kings, queens, consorts, and diplomatic headaches from Madrid to Moscow. Family letters begin to read like a list of international incidents. Louise eloped with an artist. Leopold has invented a new disease. Arthur wants to join the army. And he actually means it. Every Christmas, the palace is filled with not only presents but also the collective anxiety of multiple governments hoping you won't seat France next to Germany at dinner. It doesn't help that the press is obsessed. Every minor squabble is magnified into a full-blown succession crisis. Will the Queen's favourite grandchild inherit the British throne? Princess Helena forgets tiara, royal turmoil ensues. If Bertie so much as sneezes in the direction of a French actress, there are rumours of divorce, duels, and potential international sabotage. You sometimes wonder if the reporters camped outside the palace have names, or if they simply materialise wherever drama is brewing, like mushrooms after a rainstorm. The family photographs, intended as harmless snapshots, are scrutinised for hidden meaning. If one child is frowning, the Times suggests a Prussian plot. If two are whispering, it's an Anglo-Russian alliance. If you're seated next to John Brown, society goes into collective meltdown. You once smiled for a photograph, only for every paper to declare a new era of sunshine and restored harmony. The reality? Someone had just pinched your ankle under the table. Possibly Alice, possibly the dog. Even after your reign, the legacy of scandal continues. The grandchildren, scattered across the courts of Europe, take up the family tradition of marrying for politics and, occasionally, for love. Never a combination that ends quietly. Your granddaughter Alexandra marries the Tsar of Russia, and by the time World War I rolls around, it seems like half the continent is related, and the other half wishes it wasn't. The term the grandmother of Europe takes on a whole new meaning when every major headline features a cousin, nephew, or suspiciously familiar in-law. You tried to instill duty, restraint, and a sense of public service. Instead, you got a royal soap opera played out on a continental stage. There are scandals about secret marriages, forbidden romances, wild parties, and the occasional tiara lost at sea. Meanwhile, the British public watches, enthralled and exasperated, shaking their heads but always hungry for more. But there's pride in this chaos, too. Your family is proof that history isn't made by perfect people, but by real, flawed, passionate human beings. Each headline, each gossipy letter, each disastrous dinner seating chart is a testament to the ridiculous, glorious, exhausting project of monarchy. So, as you look back, you know that your legacy will be debated for generations. Some will call it scandal, some will call it history. But one thing's for sure, no one will ever accuse your descendants of being boring. And honestly, would you want it any other way? At the end of it all, your marriage is held up as the model of propriety, while secretly inspiring more rumors than any royal couple before or since. History remembers the love story, but you remember the headaches. Let's step into the long, drafty corridors of myth. The Victorian marriage, yours, Queen Victoria's, with Prince Albert, has become the stuff of legend, endlessly cited as the gold standard for marital virtue, domestic tranquility, and genteel romance. The wedding portraits are dusted off for every royal anniversary. Little girls are told stories of Victoria and Albert, and etiquette books everywhere insist your household was a living example of what can be achieved with daily prayers, sensible shoes, and a proper appreciation for lace collars. The truth, of course, is a little messier. No matter how carefully the history books are polished, behind every black and white photograph lurks a reality tinged with chaos, compromise, and the occasional passive-aggressive breakfast note. You and Albert were, by all accounts, very much in love, but you were also two strong-willed people running the world's largest empire while raising 9 children, surviving in-laws, and navigating the emotional minefield of endless court obligations. Sometimes your marriage was an ideal, sometimes it was a farce. Start with the basics, marital privacy, or, more accurately, the complete absence thereof. Forget romantic evenings alone. Your every interaction was witnessed, catalogued, and interpreted by an army of advisors, relatives, and suspiciously attentive butlers. Try having a heartfelt discussion about family finances when your mother-in-law is giving helpful commentary from the end of the table, and a court painter is sketching your expressions for posterity. It's a wonder you didn't invent the post-it note just to communicate in code. Then there's the myth of harmony. Yes, you and Albert presented a united front. You genuinely admired each other's intellect, work ethic, and sometimes even each other's hair. But harmony doesn't mean agreement. You fought about everything from curtain fabrics to childcare. Albert, ever the reformer, was forever proposing new ways to run the palace, reorganize the staff, and improve efficiency. You, meanwhile, valued tradition, personal loyalty, and the right to keep your favorite footstool right where you liked it. He introduced ventilation systems, you introduced stern glares. Somehow, it all balanced out eventually. And then there were the rumors. No couple, royal or otherwise, has inspired quite so much speculation. The press obsessed over your every move, interpreting a missed breakfast as evidence of marital discord and a matching tartan as a sign of undying love. When you exchanged notes, the staff tried to decipher them. If Albert went for a walk with the children, the papers suggested you were plotting in secret. Every minor squabble became tabloid fodder. Every tender glance was immortalized in watercolors and sold for a shilling. You'd think no one in England had ever been married before. Beneath the spectacle, there was always the reality of partnership. You and Albert shared triumphs and heartbreaks. The arrival of children, the burdens of rule, the grief of losing loved ones. When you clashed, it was often because you cared too much. Your letters, now studied by historians and occasionally cited in etiquette columns, are full of warmth, frustration, wit, and the occasional underlined demand to please stop reorganizing the linen cupboard. Of course, history has a way of simplifying things. The love story of Victoria and Albert has become a sort of shorthand for the perfect marriage, tidy, chaste, and endlessly devoted. But perfection wasn't what made your marriage last. It was resilience, negotiation, and a shared sense of humor, sometimes gallows, sometimes slapstick. It was finding the balance between duty and delight, between the private laughter behind closed doors and the public performance required by your crowns. In the end, your marriage wasn't flawless, but it was fiercely real. If the world wants to remember you as the epitome of marital bliss, let them. You know the truth. The love was strong, the headaches frequent, and, if nothing else, you proved that a marriage can survive anything, even a palace full of gossip, 9 children, and the world's worst gravy. That, perhaps, is the real Victorian legacy. Ever wondered how a queen relaxes? Picture this. You're knee-deep in mineral mud, surrounded by ladies, in waiting, who gossip faster than Wi-Fi, while your masseuse is just a duchess with opinions and surprisingly sharp elbows. Self-care in Victorian England means cucumber slices, tepid water, and at least 3 new rumours by tea time. Welcome to the Royal Spa Day, Queen Victoria edition, where relaxation is less about tranquility and more about surviving an afternoon of well-meaning torture in the name of beauty and health. Forget your modern spa. with its soothing music and eucalyptus-scented towels. Here, the soundtrack is the distant clatter of silver spoons, the hiss of hot water, sometimes lukewarm at best, and the steady hum of court gossip as it percolates through steam and mineral mist. First up is the mud bath. This isn't the luxurious, bubbling pool you may imagine. No, this is a porcelain tub filled with lukewarm, slightly gritty mud from somewhere with a vaguely Germanic name and a royal seal of dubious authenticity. You lower yourself in, feeling instantly ridiculous, only to discover that the mud is the exact shade of melancholy. Your ladies-in-waiting flutter around, offering encouragement, "It's good for the skin, Your Majesty," and sneakily trading court secrets. Meanwhile, a footman is stationed nearby with towels and an expression that suggests he'd rather be in Crimea. As you soak, the real therapy isn't the minerals, it's the conversation. There is nothing more revitalizing or more dangerous than court gossip marinated in steam. You listen as the Duchess of Dribbleton complains about her gout. Countess What's-Your-Name bemoans the scandalous lack of ribbons at last week's ball. And Lady Arabella claims she saw Lord Fancipants wink at the pastry chef. You try to relax, but it's hard to meditate when half your attention is on the state of European politics, and the other half is wondering if someone will mention your own rumoured fondness for ginger biscuits. Then comes the massage. There are no professional masseuses here, just your most senior duchess, whose interpretation of soothing pressure is straight out of the battlefield manual. She kneads your shoulders with an enthusiasm bordering on vendetta, all the while offering advice about marriage, empire, and the superiority of Scottish soap. You suspect you may have lost an inch in height, but you gain 3 new insights into the latest palace drama and the real reason Lady Mutton left last week's supper in a huff. The cucumber mask follows. Thin slices, precisely arranged, and almost certainly the wrong vegetable. Someone forgot to chill them, so instead of refreshment, you're left with tepid circles that keep sliding down your nose as the ladies comment on your complexion. "You look positively radiant, Your Majesty," they insist, while surreptitiously checking their own reflection in the silver tray. The air is thick with the scent of rosewater and mild rivalry. After the treatments, you're ushered to the relaxation room, an airy chamber where you're expected to recline gracefully on a fainting couch, sip tepid water, and listen to someone's niece perform on the harp. This is where the real quicksand of the royal spa day lies. Small talk. The topics drift from new recipes for blancmange to who is secretly courting whom, and, inevitably, back to you. Does the Queen truly bathe in ass's milk? Someone whispers, loudly enough for the whole room to hear. You smile, let the question linger, and invent a new rumour with a well-timed sigh. By tea time, you're more exhausted than when you began, covered in a fresh layer of mud, court secrets, and half-remembered compliments. Self-care may be the order of the day, but true relaxation is a luxury even a queen can barely afford. Still, you do emerge a little softer, a little wiser, and with just enough new material to stay ahead in the game of palace intrigue. And if anyone asks how you unwind, you simply smile, sip your tea, and reply, with mud, gossip, and a duchess who can crack walnuts with her elbows. In a world before texting, every flick of a fan and arrangement of daisies means something. Need to tell your husband he's late for dinner? There's a bouquet for that. Want to let the court know you're annoyed? Just sigh loudly and collapse onto a chaise longue. Bonus points if you make it look poetic. Welcome to Victorian court life, where communication is equal parts art and subterfuge. You, Queen Victoria, must master not just the spoken word but a whole arsenal of subtle signals, symbolic gestures, and sighs that would make a modern soap opera look understated. Before group chats and emoji, your entire social network is powered by peonies, fluttering lace, and the strategic raising of an eyebrow at precisely the right moment. Let's start with the fan. More than a means of keeping cool under 17 layers of brocade, the fan is your personal semaphore. A slow flutter. I'm bored. A quick snap shut. That's quite enough gossip, thank you. Dropped deliberately on the floor. Help. Save me from this interminable conversation about potato blight. Rumor has it that some ladies can conduct whole arguments with nothing more than a fan and a carefully timed gasp. The palace footmen, trained in the silent observation of royal moods, take their cues accordingly. Tea refills for a gentle wave. Strategic retreat for an agitated flick. Next up, the flowers. The Victorian language of flowers is a code so complex it requires its own glossary. Want to send a message of affection? Bundle together violets for loyalty, forget-me-nots for devotion, and a single red rose for love, but not too much unless you're ready for scandal. Need to rebuke a particularly forward earl? Yellow carnations, you disappoint me, do the trick. Occasionally, a well-meaning aunt accidentally creates diplomatic tension by presenting you with a bouquet of hydrangeas, heartlessness, and lilies, majesty, but also death. You accept them with a gracious smile and a mental note to send a return bouquet of marigolds, grief. To keep everyone guessing. But why stop there? In this world of veiled communication, even your sighs are a form of punctuation. The wistful at the window sigh, I long for simpler times, or perhaps just a nap. The loud in the drawing room sigh, these guests are tedious, and I wish to be left alone. The barely audible at dinner sigh, if someone doesn't remove that dish of boiled calves' feet, I may faint. If you collapse onto a chaise longue with a hand to your brow, it's the Victorian equivalent of sending a GIF. An instant mood update for the entire room. Bonus points if you time your dramatic sigh to coincide with a particularly awkward silence. Your ladies-in-waiting, of course, are fluent in this code. They decipher your bouquets, mirror your sighs, and occasionally engage in silent conversations involving only glances and hairpins. The staff are trained to interpret subtle cues. When you tilt your teacup a certain way, it means you're ready to leave. When you adjust your tiara, someone discreetly opens a window. If you roll your eyes, well, best not to mention what that means in polite company. Even Prince Albert is drawn into this elaborate ballet. When he's late for dinner, you don't need to utter a word. Just send a spray of wilted violets to his study and practice your most sorrowful sigh. He responds in kind. A single white camellia left on your pillow, meaning adoration and perfection, or, in his case, please forgive the beetle specimens in the sitting room. Your marriage, like your reign, is a masterpiece of coded affection, occasionally interrupted by a footman delivering yet another bouquet of ambiguous intent. Of course, it's not all subtlety. Sometimes you enjoy the melodrama of it all. You deliberately drop your fan at state dinners just to watch a room full of diplomats scramble for interpretation. You engineer bouquets that keep the court in a frenzy for days. And when words simply won't do, you let out a sigh so poetic that it lingers in the air long after the conversation has moved on. So if anyone asks how you manage to rule an empire and maintain order in your own home, you can tell them it's all about mastering the secret language, the one spoken not with words, but with fans, flowers, and the perfectly timed, world-weary sigh. And so, as you drift off tonight, tucked into your own bed, with no royal nannies, no lace collars, and no chance of waking up to find your cousin has become your fiancé, take a deep breath and give thanks for modern comforts. No one's expecting you to run an empire before breakfast, write 30 letters before lunch, or pose for a portrait that will haunt your descendants for centuries. Tonight, you've survived the scandals, the passive-aggressive love notes, the relentless parade of royal offspring, and enough lace-trimmed drama to fill the Thames. You've managed meddling in-laws, the world's nosiest press, and a husband who insists on cataloguing the drapes. And through it all, You've learned that even the most powerful people in history were mostly just trying to keep up with fashion, with family, and with their own sanity. As you settle into the softness of your mattress, no straw poking you, no suspicious draft, maybe whisper a silent thank you to the real Victorians who endured corsets, heartbreak, and relentless gossip so you could enjoy central heating and, most importantly, privacy. Because if history teaches us anything, it's that humans are stubborn, hopeful, and magnificently ridiculous, no matter what century they live in. So let your mind wander through grand halls and secret gardens, past the scandals and the scones. Rest easy, knowing you'll wake up in a world where no one is drawing your bath with a side of political intrigue. Good night. Sleep well. And remember, if Queen Victoria can survive her family, you can survive Monday morning.